Recording in progress. Can we check the Can we check the podium mic?
I needed to anyone. So the video won't play from anyone.
Yeah, I got to know.
But that's
Can I call him for because if he launches it from here by just saying that I officially launched the campaign, then he sits here, but he can't really see the video. So I thought, then we give him a hand mic to say it from there.
we have.
I think that's better. Somebody holds the mic or whatever, and then he keeps seated, watches it, and then I invite it to you. Okay?
Yeah, I think that's true. Let it launch from see the video.
He's saying that let him not say it here, go back, and then come back. Launching first the video. Be able to watch it from So he just says I officially launched this, but they actually click from there. And testing podium mic 1 2 3. May I request everyone who's outside to please come and occupy your seats inside the hall. The chief guest is already on his way, so we should be starting soon. हाँ मेरे ख्याल वहाँ. And I'm keeping my phone on silent with me. This time is 5, but at 5 I should start. हेलो टेस्टिंग माइक इसको लाइव रखिए नहीं won't you make this live but we are not clear about कि किनको mic देना है कब so somebody should be in charge of giving the mic on these seats. Audio control. It's there. You will tell me when to start. You're there? आप बैठ जाओ आप क्यों खड़े हो? You're really working hard. 7 is okay. 8 is okay. You should take leave. Then when will you leave now? 6 months after you leave. 3 months. Let's hope सब ठीक है. These seats खाली मुझे अच्छी नहीं लगती. आजकल ऑनलाइन होने के चक्कर में नहीं प्रॉब्लम. Is it true, Devon? Is it Omicron or normal COVID? Bangalore में 62-year-old or spread जल्दी. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our chief guest, Honorable Mr. Justice S. Raveendra Bhatt, Judge, Supreme Court. Warm welcome to you, sir. May I request everyone to please come and settle down and take your positions in the hall. We'll be starting shortly in maybe 3 or 4 minutes from now. Requesting everyone to please maintain all COVID preventive protocols. So do keep your mask up. And I'm sure you've sanitized your hands at the entrance. And yes, of course, mobiles on the silent mode. Mobiles band kar lijiye, please. Namaskar. I welcome all of you to the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, or World Disability Day. This is an international observance promoted by the United Nations since 1992. The day is about promoting the rights and well-being of persons with disabilities at every level of society and development, and to raise awareness and to encourage a discourse on the situation of persons with disabilities in all aspects of political, social, economic, and cultural life. The global crisis of COVID-19 has not only deepened the existing inequalities, but the pandemic has also exposed the extent of exclusion of the marginalized sections, including persons with disabilities who have been the hardest hit. It has made access to healthcare, education, employment, and equal participation in social life all the more tough and challenging for them. And hence, a comprehensive approach is required to ensure that persons with disabilities are not left behind. I'd like to announce that the event today is being live streamed on the NCPDP Facebook and YouTube pages. I'd now like to invite NCPDP Chairman, Mr. Som Mittal, on stage. Mr. Som Mittal is the former Chairman and President of NASSCOM, the premier trade body for the IT BPM industry in India. Mr. Mittal has more than 40 years of global experience across diverse industries and has an established track record of scaling up and building industries' lasting organizations by creating high-performance leadership teams. Mr. Mittal is closely associated with the social sector and education, including many universities, corporate entities, and NGOs, and is the chairman of the National Center for Promotion of Employment for Disabled People, NCPDP. He's also on the board of Apollo Hospitals. Mr. Mittal served as a member of the Prime Minister's Committee on National E-Governance and was the chairman of the Advisory Council to develop the IT vision for Indian Railways. Mr. Som Mittal.
Thank you, friends, and thank you, Sangeeta, for that introduction. And I welcome you on this very important event that we have. So I must also announce that innovation is happening. So they have a mask here through which I can speak. So it covers up, and that's why you see this little thing which holds this in place. So I'm okay speaking. Can you hear me? Thank you. So let me first welcome. Thank you, sir, Mr. Justice Shripati Raveendra Bhatt of Supreme Court of India. So your presence here signifies a lot to us. We will also have shortly joining us some of the members of parliaments. We have this happening in collaboration with UNESCO. Mr. Eric Falt has sent a message, but they are the ones who have been supporting us. So each year on this day, we celebrate the great determination and the very positive attitude that the people with disability have in spite of their disability. We at NCPDP on the International Day of Persons with Disability are delighted to launch our campaign, The Missing Millions. The question that comes to us is, why this campaign and why now? So the disability sector represents almost 75 million citizens, and this is a very significant number. In fact, we have no data, but we are quite sure that based on World Bank and many other research that have been done, we constitute almost 6% of India's population. But do we get the attention and priority required? we don't think so, and hence the word missing millions. So in a lot of ways, the ask is not charity, but just the right that the Constitution also gives us. So we should not be just remembered on this day of the International Disability Day, but we do hope there'll be more sustained action, and that really is the mission of the missing millions. I just name a few very quickly. We were very delighted that in December 2016, the Parliament enacted the Right for People with Disability Rights Act, and we were all very delighted. I think it has some amazing provisions that are there. So the act got passed, but we are very disappointed in a way that both in letter and spirit, the act still is a long, long way to get implemented. This act was, in our opinion, path-breaking and would have changed the lives of people. Similarly, accessibility, the Honorable Prime Minister had launched the Accessible India campaign, where many of our cities had to become accessible, government buildings had to become accessible. I think some work has been done, but we are far, far away. In 2021, no funds were released to 20 states, and only ₹3 crores were released to states for implementation of what is known as unique disability identification, which just shows the small amounts that we are spending towards this cause. So, and the list goes on, but it's, we are all wearing a mask here and standing. In a reply in the Parliament on August 21, it was mentioned that only 3,254 people with disability had received their first vaccine. As we stand today on 28th of November 21, the number of people who have received both the vaccine is 4,018. I tried to calculate the percentage, but there were too many zeros if we look at the number of people with disability that we have. So why are they missing? For many of us, we are talking about free, but many of the disabled can actually not come to where the vaccines are being given. And if you look at the hinterland, I think these millions are missing in the statistics that we are talking about. So only 30% of the primary schools have anything to do with disabled. But if we cross the primary school, the number of people with disability in the junior and secondary school is 0.5%. Where is the right to education, which we are talking about? So there is a long list of, I would say, the rights that we have denied to the people with disability. I think the intent is right. I think everyone we speak to says very positive stuff. They're very committed to it. But then if it's not translated into action, that intent just remains an intent. But the good news is the intent is right. I think we have crossed that barrier. We do hope that a campaign will bring forward and stir action. And we are committed, I committed to, on behalf of NCPDB, to the sector, that this campaign is not a one day. We are launching it not because it is the International Day of Disability, but this is a campaign that is a 3-year process that we think we have targets for ourselves. And we do hope, sir, your own presence here is important for us, because we do want even our judiciary to help us enact this, or rather enact it has happened. If you can actually make this and raise the level of awareness on the disabled and the rights, I think we would be extremely gratified. Thank you very much, and we look forward. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mittal, as always, raising the right questions. Let's hope we can find the answers quickly. We are happy to announce that UNESCO is partnering with NCPDP for the Missing Millions campaign, and we have a message from Mr. Eric Ford, Director and UNESCO Representative, New Delhi. Can we please have the video, please?
Dear friends, the last few months have brought to the fore the disproportionate impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the lives of persons with disabilities. With learning shifting online, the education system has failed to meet the needs of learners with disabilities in particular. And here, I really want to congratulate NCP-EDP for initiating the Missing Millions campaign, which shines a light upon the many challenges that inhibit creating an inclusive education system. As we have now begun to recover from the impact of the pandemic, it is essential that in constructing an education for the future, we build back more sustainably. We must ensure that a learner's fundamental right to an education is never threatened again. In line with the UN's commitment to lifelong learning enshrined in Sustainable Development Goal 4, an inclusive education, both in terms of reach and quality, must be the core of our national and global education priorities. Throughout this pandemic, UNESCO has and will continue to be at the forefront of supporting the education of persons with disabilities by working with member states in building inclusive human and institutional capabilities, building a laboratory of ideas to enable informed policy decisions, and raising awareness on the needs of persons with disabilities through international summits. And of course, I want to mention also our own contribution at UNESCO New Delhi of the State of the Education Report for India 2019, which focused specifically on persons with disabilities. The right to education for learners with disabilities must be our entry point to ensuring that learning never stops. We must all work together to ensure that every learner is seen, their needs and wants taken care of, and that their education counts. Every learner matters and matters equally. This is what inclusion is all about.
Mr. Eric Falt, Director and UNESCO Representative, New Delhi. Friends, I'd now like to request Mr. Arman Ali, Executive Director, NCP-EDP, to deliver his keynote address.
Amma. Mana ya? Amma. Soya.
Hello. Honorable Justice S.R. Bhatt, Mr. Soumittal, Chairman, NCP-EDP, Mr. Rana Mukherjee, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India, Joyce from UNESCO, Eric Falt, my friends from the disability sector, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to extend my warm greetings on the occasion of the World Disability Day, also known as the International Day of the Persons with Disabilities. To everyone across the country, to the last person in the most remotest village. And NCP-EDP is known to be the organization which is across disability and has been able to take the organizations of persons with disabilities from across the country together as part of the National Disability Network. As I speak today, as rightly mentioned by my chair, that we are grappling with COVID. Before we thought we have overcome and left COVID-19 behind, we have a new virus variant doing talks around, and it's also giving us a very unsettling feeling, the feeling of what happened around the first wave and the second wave in the country. While India celebrates 75 years of independence, and we are really making a lot of inroads and going forward in every direction. You know, you talk about technology, business, you talk about healthcare, we talk about anything that you talk about, India is there and we're moving forward in the last 75 years. Ladies and gentlemen, the screen on my behind, there's a poster which is designed and ideated by my predecessor, legendary disability right leader, late Shri Javed Abedi. It was on the 57th independence of India, where we asked, why are people with disabilities and children with disabilities are missing from schools and colleges and everywhere? So it took us 20 years for waiting. Where have we moved? This is not something that we're asking today. NCPDP has been at it from the last 25 years. The poster is the proof that we have reached out to all the stakeholders, asking questions that why are the millions missing? Where are the people with disabilities? How many people died of COVID? How many people with disabilities have been in quarantine centers? How many people with disabilities have lost jobs for that matter? Sir, what doesn't count is not counted. I was reading the newspaper recently, and I came upon this news where there's this organization which is called a State of Pet Homelessness Index report, which was released on 25th of November. It counted 80 million homeless cats and dogs in India who were living in shelter or the streets. So it gives me hope and also anguish that if we are able to count the homeless animals who are dogs and cats, which are also very important and I think is needed, I think we can also count people with disabilities in our country. And this is in this direction that we have decided to launch the Missing Million campaign. This Missing Million campaign, we have reached out to the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, the Ministry of the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disability, the Department of Statistical thing in Ministry of Home. And the Missing Million campaign is about reaching out to every person in the country through our network, through partners. I think everybody needs to be there, persons with disability, their families, the organizations, private sector, government, judiciary, students, education institutions. I think everybody needs to join hands and identify the persons with disabilities, make persons with disability feel to be a part of this country and contribute to the cause of this country, to the economy of this country. So through this Missing Million campaign, we will do series of workshops, series of lectures, capacity building programs, and challenge the status quo of this welfare and charity mindset of people, and also the mindset of people with disability who consider disability as their qualification. Disability is your identity and not your qualification for a job or thing. So I think it's time that we change the narrative from nothing about us, without us, to simply nothing without us. To this, I request each one of you who are watching us on this live stream, who will reach out after this program, to please extend your support to the Missing Million campaign, and let's leave no one behind. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Armanji. Spoken straight from the heart, and I think it touched everybody. Friends, as announced before, our honorable chief guest for the event, Honorable Mr. Justice Shripati Raveendra Bhatt, is here. It's a matter of great honor and privilege to have you in our midst. Justice Bhatt did his BA honors in English from Hindu College, University of Delhi, and obtained LLB degree from the Campus Law Center, Faculty of Law, University of Delhi in 1982. He enrolled as an advocate with the Delhi Bar Council in 1982 and practiced in the Supreme Court, where he was enrolled as an advocate on record in 1989. His practice includes public law, employment, education, and constitutional disputes, and he has appeared in several important cases before constitution benches of the Supreme Court during his legal career. He was appointed as an additional judge of the Delhi High Court on 16th July 2004 and as a permanent judge on 20th February 2006. He was appointed as the Chief Justice of the High Court of Rajasthan on 5th May 2019 and elevated as a judge of the Supreme Court of India on 23rd September 2019. I request him to please come on stage, and the chairman, NCPDP, Mr. Som Mittal, and executive director, NCPDP, Mr. Arman Ali, will also join us in felicitating our chief guest. Yes, we could do the launch. We want to put space there. Yeah, we can launch. Short video, yeah. Thank you very much. I now request the chief guest, Honorable Mr. Justice S. Raveendra Bhatt, Judge of the Supreme Court of India, to launch the Missing Millions video.
And play the video.
What should I say?
Just we're launching missing.
We are launching the Missing Million Campaigns video.
But it is an accepted fact that India has one of the highest numbers of people with disabilities globally. Even though we believe this number, we are still talking about more than 26.8 million people with disabilities in India. Why are these millions of people missing? Why don't we see them in schools or universities, in cinemas, in markets, and even in our offices? Why? What is disability? Disability arises from the interaction between a person's health condition or impairment and barriers in the environment. These barriers can be physical, attitudinal, communication, political, and other systemic barriers that discriminate against people with disabilities. The Missing Millions is an initiative to highlight issues faced by millions of disabled people in India every day and how we can overcome these. The RPWD Act of 2016 provides us with an opportunity to ensure change. The Act mandates the government to ensure that every individual enjoys the right to equality and to live with dignity and respect. Respect for inherent dignity, individual autonomy, including the freedom to make one's own choices, and independence of persons, non-discrimination, full and effective participation and inclusion in society, respect for difference and acceptance of persons with disabilities as part of human diversity and humanity, equality of opportunity and accessibility. The Disability Act is one of the strongest disability legislations in the world. and each one of us must know its provisions and push for their implementation. Let's remove the barriers from our minds to create a world where no one is left behind. The Missing Millions, an initiative by NCPEDP. For any further information, please visit www.ncpedp.org or call 7303 944 839.
That was the Missing Millions video, which emphasizes what is not counted doesn't count, and highlights the plight of people with disabilities and how not having accurate data on disability has excluded people with disabilities from the mainstream. Friends, I now like to request our Honorable Chief Guest to kindly address the August gathering.
Good evening. Mr. Soumitra, Chairperson NCPEDP, Mr. Arman Ali, Executive Director, Mr. Akshay Jain, panelists for today's discussions, ladies and gentlemen, and my dear friends. Today marks the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. As witnessed in the simple yet immensely informative video, India is home to over 26.8 million people with disabilities, amounting to over 2% of our population. But that's just a statistic. When we gave ourselves the Constitution in 1950, we made a promise to strive for equality before the law and to assist in achieving that, introduced safeguards under the fundamental rights to level the playing field. We imbibe the spirit of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in our domestic law, which calls for equality in dignity and rights of all, and ratified the Conventions on Rights of Disabilities, Persons with Disabilities, by enacting the second version of it, that is the Right of Persons with Disabilities Act, again in 2016. And yet, the lived experience of people with disabilities paints a very different picture. The definition of discrimination incorporated into the Act from the Convention includes exclusion or restriction on the basis of disability and manifests in many forms, such as social, which is attitudinal, economic in employment opportunities, political, which is fundamental to a participatory democracy, and other systemic barriers. These barriers, as defined in the definitional provisional, hamper the full and effective participation of persons with disabilities in society. So what do we do to ensure that our fellow members of the community, those with disabilities, feel included and are not subject to humiliation? How do we dismantle societal thinking that allows association of disability with shame? We do so by effectively implementing the rights enshrined under the Act and working towards a substantive equality. An important first step is to enforce the right to education. Section 16 of this Act casts a duty upon educational institutions funded or recognized by the government to admit students with disabilities without discrimination. Section 32 calls for a mandatory 5% reservation for students with benchmark disabilities, which is in excess of 40% of disabilities. The Supreme Court, in one of its judgments, said there is a great necessity of creating the level playing field whereby all citizens have equality of fair opportunities to enable them to realize their full potential and experience well-being, which can be achieved by only providing proper accessibilities. To this effect, it is necessary to develop the requisite infrastructure. The Supreme Court in another case took cognizance of the low student to teacher ratio for children with special needs and directed the central government to notify separate norms for special teachers who alone could teach such children and fill vacancies to better the ratio. If I remember the provisions of the Act, it goes beyond what the RTE itself says. The RTE actually empowers children, the rights granted by the RTE stop at the age of 14, whereas the PWD or the Persons with Disability Act takes it further till the age of 18. And therefore, it is important that this right is actually realized and it doesn't remain a dead letter. The statistic that we were told earlier, in fact, it paints a very dismal picture. The second, and flowing from the first, is employment, which is the main focus of NCPEDP. While the Act mandates that the government must reserve at least 4% of the seats for people with benchmark disabilities under Section 33 and 34, it also calls upon the government to incentivize the private sector in adopting similar practices under Section 35. I believe that in order for the principles of the Act to be realized to their highest potential, the active participation of all sections of society and not the state alone, which means private employers, private entities, is also crucial. It should not be left to the discretion of such entities to choose to involve persons with disabilities in their workforce. They must. And how is that possible? It is possible for the government to mandate that any government contract which is given to private employers or private entities which employ people should certainly mandatorily contain a certain element or certain percentage of employment set apart for persons with disabilities. Like in other cases in the US and other countries, you should incentivize this. If you incentivize it, maybe you can give a kind of marking system, have a marking system where people who do this score more and get preference in securing the contract. So this kind of innovative schemes is essential. The third is awareness under Section 39. Attitudinal barriers that I had referred to earlier can only be dissolved when sensitization of the public is successfully done. In the brief chat, a small chat that I had with Mr. Mittal, I asked, can't we map these missing millions if we include in the coming census? And his answer was also very revealing. He said, and that's the attitudinal part. He said that we are very shy at including, we as a society, it's not that the government or any, we are very shy at revealing this. We are therefore, as a collective, as a society, we are shy and we shy away from including these queries. But that I would have thought is the easiest way to map the missing millions. For instance, we have the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, which tries to map the entire population, child population, and see that no child is left standing without education. Of course, these campaigns have their limitations, but the point is when we have a ready mechanism, which is meant to map a population and also collect a wealth of data connected with it, adding a few queries to that census operation is an easy task, I would assume. But then that's a matter which has to be taken up with the policymakers, and perhaps this is the right time to do so. This is compounded when by technical interpretations, institutions fail to uphold its spirit. The Supreme Court expressly held in another judgment, Vikas Kumar, that the interpretation in such a manner so as to deny the rights is incorrect and cannot be sustained. Organizations that, like your center, are key drivers in spreading awareness, and I'm confident that the Missing Millions campaign will go a long way in achieving the objective. The flip side is equally important: awareness to persons with disabilities. The alternate means by which this can be done, such as greater access to Braille and sign language interpreters, can lead to more inclusion. However, we must also be mindful to the requirements of invisible disabilities or lesser spoken of forms of disability, because there is no one-size-fits-all solution. One manner in which this can be assessed is by conducting disability audits to find out the scope of such requirements, which was especially directed by the Supreme Court for supply of necessities during the COVID-19 pandemic. But then I'm shocked to learn that only 4,000 of the 26.8 million people have been mapped and who have got vaccinated fully. So there is much that needs to be done, as always. The fourth is accountability. Institutions entrusted with implementation of the Act must be held accountable when they fail to do so. According to the research of the National Education Policy, only 29.4% of the schools across the country had children with disabilities enrolled. And of course, Mr. Mittal spoke about this, so I will not speak about it again. When it comes to approach, we must undertake what I just want to read out, a short verse, and I find that poignantly describes what I hope to convey. We did not go on to the stage. Neither were we called. We were shown our places, told to sit, but they, sitting on the stage, went on telling us of our sorrows. Our sorrows remained ours. They never became theirs. So the point I'm making is, it is important that the not disabled, I would put it as the not disabled, for us not only to write, but to share the table when we make our policies with those people who are going to be affected by them. I hope that the stakeholders and other members present today will keep this approach in mind and ensure to pass the mic to those whose voices we need to listen to. Often when allyship, this is what is called as allyship, is used to discuss disability, it has not been defined or identified by disabled people. I am mindful that those models of allyship are often one-sided, in which the disabled person is still positioned as a charity case, inferior, or in some cases their differences are assimilated rather than celebrated. Sometimes people who call themselves allies are in fact doing more harm. Of course, I don't direct this here because I quite see that this campaign is inclusive. In other cases, allies are in fact doing more harm than good, and I'm self-conscious of that. I urge us all to radicalize it in ways that work towards justice and access built on mutual respect and care, and by giving disabled people a platform to voice their perspectives with minimal restrictions or requirement. NCEPD is a fantastic effort in the right direction. I hope that we will explore and imagine forms of radical disability allyship, not just theoretically, but with tangible changes in the form of a reasonable accommodation, infrastructure, facilities, attitude changes, etc. Because without radical allyship, ableism will persist. I would like to conclude with the impactful words of the late Mr. Javed Abidi, the founder of NCEPD and a pioneer activist in the field of disability rights. Nothing about us without us. I urge us all to create a more inclusive environment by working towards inclusivity and access built on mutual respect and care, and to facilitate platforms such as this one for persons with disabilities to voice their perspective. I'm happy to be a part of this evening and listen to your shared experiences and wish NCPEDP great success in their Missing Million campaigns. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justice Bhatt, first of all, for taking out time from your busy schedule and then keeping some time for this really pertinent issue. Just a small memento from Mr. Arman Ali. Mas. Thank you very much once again, Justice Bhatt. It was a great honor to have you amidst us. Friends, we will now proceed to the panel discussion on amplifying the voices of missing millions, perspectives from persons with disabilities. The panelists will deliberate over their personal experiences, their trials, tribulations, and triumphs. Moderating this session would be Mr. Arman Ali. I'd request you to come on stage and would request the panelists to join him once your announcements and brief intros are read out. The first panelist for this discussion, Padma Shri Javed Ahmed Tak. Javed Ahmed Tak was recently awarded the 4th highest civilian award, Padma Shri 2020, for his exemplary work in inclusion of persons with disabilities in Jammu and Kashmir. He has been leading the disability movement from the last 2 decades. Javed has been organizing a number of awareness and sensitization programs among persons with disabilities, stakeholders, and among Panchayati Raj institutions in order to ensure the overall development of persons with disabilities. Padma Shri Javed Ahmed Tak. Joining us virtually, Dr. Meenu Bhambani. She is a CSR and D&I professional with over 2 decades of experience in the area of human development with specialization in social policy. Currently, she has been executing regional corporate citizenship and IND strategy, working with 12 Asia Pacific locations. Her early career was spent with the World Bank and non-profit sector on research and disability advocacy. She strongly self-identifies herself at many intersections of disability, professional, woman, and South Asian origin Indian. Also joining us virtually, Ms. Smita Sadashivan, a self-advocate for cross-disability rights in India and an accessibility consultant. Smita has been working for the advancement of human rights of persons with all disabilities at the national level for the past 16 years. She is a member of multiple organizations working for the cause of persons with disabilities, Apart from being the accessibility consultant for the Election Commission of India, she carries out different roles, including that of regional trainer for South Asia Women's Institute on Leadership National Committee for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, facilitated by NCPDP, New Delhi. Mr. Ankit Jindal, also joining us virtually, a person with visual impairment. Ankit made his life mission to foster inclusion, accessibility, and universal design for people with disabilities. He represented India as a youth icon at the United Nations. Ankit excelled as a marketing professional, and his career graph spanning over 15 years leads inclusion by example in the corporate world. An MBA from FMS Delhi, Ankit mentors several blind MBA aspirants. He's been a speaker at several national and international forums, including the UN and TEDx, and received numerous awards and recognitions. Mr. Ankit Jindal. Mr. Rahul Bajaj. Rahul Bajaj currently works as a senior resident fellow at the Vidhi Center for Legal Policy in New Delhi. A lawyer by training, Rahul successfully completed the BCL and MPhil in law at the University of Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar. Before joining Vidhi, Rahul served as a judicial law clerk to the Indian Supreme Court Justice D.Y. Chandrachud. His areas of interest are constitutional law, intellectual property law, and disability rights law. He's also a special correspondent on the rights of persons with disabilities for the Oxford Human Rights Hub. A round of applause for Mr. Rahul Bajaj. Ms. Kavya Mukhija. Kavya is a writer, poet, disability rights advocate, and calligraphy artist. She lives with the condition of multiple disability and has represented India at various international conferences on disability, accessibility, and inclusion. An NCPDP Javed Abidi Fellow, Kavya had the honor to be the youngest and only Indian child delegate at the Conference of State Parties at the United Nations in 2015. Currently, she is pursuing her master's in applied psychology from the University of Delhi. Ms. Kavya Mukhija. And now it's over to Mr. Arman Ali to moderate the session, Amplifying the Voices of Missing Millions.
Thank you so much, Sangeeta ji. Good evening once again, ladies and gentlemen. एक बार फिर जोरदार तालियों से सबका स्वागत किया जाए. I think मेरे दोस्त हैं सारे, and it's interesting that आज panelist में मुझे moderate करना पड़ रहा है. Ankit has not been able to join us because of some emergency. He as he's trying to join as soon as possible. Somebody please keep time and indicate me. I might just go on and on. So to that, I must acknowledge our partner and my trustee, Mr. N.S. Narayan, President of the National Association of the Deaf, and Anuj Chen, Executive Director for National Association of the Deaf. Thank you so much for being here. They have been a constant partner of NCPDP for over the last 2 decades, and we continue to go strong, like in the NDN and so on. So, and I would again request all of you to give a round of applause for Padma Shri Javed Ahmed Tak for this being receiving the first highest recognition. So, Javed bhai, I will come to you. पहला सवाल आपसे पूछूंगा मैं, मतलब persons with disability are always viewed as an object of pity, एक दया के पात्र की तरह देखा जाता है, और आप you will agree with me कि कई धारणा ऐसे काफी विकलांग लोग मैंने खुद देखा है और कई बार मैं अपने आप को भी सोचता हूँ ऐसे कि they also think that it's an entitlement, welfare, or your disability becomes a qualification, identity से आगे. और stigma, due to stigma around disability, people do not come forward as an identified. Justice but थे वो भी उन्होंने कहा हमारे चेयरमैन ने स्टिग्मा इतना है कि लोग आइडेंटिफाई नहीं करते. So at a कैसे इस को बदला जाए? How do we change this approach from charity, daya, to a development, participation, rights? What are your thoughts?
Thank you everyone for participating here. Actually, when we see the person with disabilities, they are grown up in a kind of atmosphere where they feel they have done some wrong deeds. If I have got disability at the age of 20, I can say it is a punishment for me. Maybe I have done something wrong. What about the born person with disability who has no idea of the life, who is just 1 month old, and then he is kept in the four-walled room. Every time he is hidden, he is not exposed to the outer environment. He is not taken to the social gatherings. His own parents think that they should not take him out. The social stigma starts from the home. Somewhere we don't have the early identification program, a strong early identification program, the hospitals where a counselor will talk to the parent of a person with disability, child with disability, that you have to accept first. If you don't accept, leave it here. Let us take him to the institution where he will be given another mother or another set of parents who will take care of him, who will expose him to the outer world, who will give him all the rights he needs as a human. So when such a kind of environment is given at the home, it is a kind of pittiness on him that he is being brought up. So when he comes out from a footpath outside his home, it is barrierful. Then when we reach the school has no environment where a teacher can accept at a first sight to a child. There will be a volley of questions. Why he's walking in such a manner? Why he's talking in such a manner? What is the difficulty? Can he cope up? Isn't he? But
what needs to be done? I think
what needs to be done? What is the remedy? Remedy is that we first of all, the social setup should accept the children with disabilities. Second is that government should have a proper policy for the person with disabilities. It should be for the education, even for the social setup, recreation, for all the things. There should be a proper policy that nobody should. When Rights of Person with Disabilities Act was passed, in light of that, the policy should be formulated and there should be severe punitive action against those who are not given the rights of person with disabilities, who ask them how, when, where, when there are numerous type of questions. So person with disabilities who are adults now, they should not compromise with any sort of this environment. They should ask for the rights. They should come out and should pose as humans. They should pose as humans who have the rights, and they should ask rights, and if not given, they should snatch the rights.
Thank you, Javed. Now I see Meenu Bhambani. Hello, Meenu. Can you hear me? Yes.
I can hear you very well.
Super. Yes, great. So thank you for joining us in this panel. Straight up, so what do you think, from being a woman with disability, from a gender perspective, you've been in corporate from last almost more than a decade. And so where do the women with disability fare in that? Why we don't see more women with disability or children with child with disability in school, colleges, or jobs? And what do you think is the reason for them being missing everywhere?
Firstly, thank you, Arman, and thank you, NCPDP, for my voice is echoing. Is it clear there?
Yes, it's clear. Please go ahead.
Okay. I'm hearing my own echo. Okay. So, I have spent 16 years now in the corporate sector. And I worked very extensively on employment of people with disabilities. I have come across very, very few women with disabilities. A large number of them did not even identify with a disability. They continue to keep it to themselves, whether it's stigma or just this whole thing about fitting in, and hence not identifying, hence not wearing their disability on their sleeve and feeling proud of it. Pride comes much later. The first thing is self-acceptance. Given the country we live in, even from my childhood, I mean, I was the only woman with disability in my class when I was growing up, in school. In college, maybe I came across 5 or 6. I'm sure there must be many students with invisible disabilities, but with visible disabilities, I saw just a very few. Higher education, when I was doing my master's and PhD, I did not come across any other woman with disability except for my own self. So, when I started working in the area of employment, I realized the number of women with disabilities getting into education institutions itself was so limited that you continue to see them missing. You continue to find them invisible. Women with disabilities tend to be more vulnerable. And because of these vulnerabilities, parents are scared of sending them out. They don't have the resources or wherewithal to continue to support their education. People who belong to a certain class have the access to resources, are able to push their girl child to further their desire to be part of the mainstream.
So what do you think is plaguing the disability sector, and what could be a possible solution?
I think this campaign is a good start. Sometimes I feel we have had so many campaigns already, but a lot of times what happens is that we keep talking to the converted. We are preaching to the choir, and we need more visibility. We need more visibility. We need more role models of women with disabilities, and not just in disability forums. We need many, many women with disabilities in many non-disabled forums, because that is where you want them to be accepted, to be seen, standing out with difference, yet being their own. I mean, feminist conferences, if you see, you don't find women with disabilities there.
Right, very
The agenda of women with disabilities continues to remain only their agenda and no one else's. And unless they advocate for themselves. I still remember, when I met Mr. Javed Abidi in 1996, I had not met him. I keep referring to his letter, and he had told me, we need many women with disabilities who will be self-advocates. We need educated women to come forward and be their own voice, because no one else is going to raise a voice for them.
Right, that makes a lot of sense, and I completely, and I think everybody here and those who are watching us online agree with what you said. I think we have to ask all the difficult questions, and we have to fly the flag wherever it is be. We'll come to Smita. Smita, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for joining us online, Smita. You heard the chief guest, Honorable Justice Bhatt, speak. You heard Chairman speak, and they raised questions around health, vaccination of people with disabilities, and so on. You are somebody who's working very focusedly on issues around health of people with disabilities. Just wanted to understand, what does a universal health coverage 2030, which is an integral part of SDG, means to India and for people with disability in India, and what measures should we be taking to implement universal health coverage? Because we see, because we were running a helpline during the first lockdown and the second phase of the COVID, innumerable calls of help from medicines to healthcare, so on. So just wanted to send, and I believe you have to go very quickly. So I'm posing both the questions together to you. So if you could respond quickly, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Armand, for inviting me for this historic campaign. Actually, we need this, and this is the time that we have to have it. And yeah, coming back to your question, UHC, Universal Health Coverage, actually is talking about ensuring all the aspects of health. For example, it's not only curative aspects, but it is also rehabilitative aspects, it is also preventive care, it is also diagnostic aspects, and promotive health promotions, and mental health, and palliative care. So all these aspects are built into the universal health coverage. And along with this, universal health coverage is also looking at the provision of healthcare, number one, and number two, who should be provided, so no one should be left behind. So people with disabilities also have the equal right to to all the aspects of health. And third is about where, when, and how. So is it like for only a few conditions, health conditions, or is it for all conditions? It is for all conditions. And where? Is it only in city hospitals or everywhere? It should be everywhere. It should be at the community level. So this is what is promoted by UHC in Sustainable Development Goals 3 under health and well-being. And India, our country, was also a state party to the political declaration of UHC. And so we are committed to ensure UHC for every citizen in our country, including persons with disabilities. And recently, UHC 2030 platform have released their are releasing their state of UHC commitment report. And in that report, we found that most countries are giving their commitments, whereas including India, whereas they are not effectively implementing the commitments. So, for example, India is coming up with different policies or programs like Ayushman Bharat, or other. We already have the primary healthcare centers in the community. These are all very good, effective measures. But are they really effective? Are they really inclusive? Are they really accessible? No. So when can that be effective? Only when people with disabilities and other marginalized groups are part of the planning process, and when there is the information on health is being provided in accessible formats for all people with disabilities, so that people with disabilities know that I can reach this person, or I can access this particular center in case of an emergency, or whenever I have a health requirement, I can access, or I can connect with this particular person with this some referral point. So these kind of bridging is actually missing, number one. And number two, all disability related health care is also missing. For example, rehabilitation or palliative care, or promoting the disability health. For example, there is if to prevent the further disability, to prevent further deterioration of a person with disability. So these kind of things are missing.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. So we gather that there's a lot of work to be done in the health sector.
Yes, absolutely. And we need to be inclusive.
Yeah.
People should be included in the policy level discussions.
Right. So that brings, I think, thank you so much for this very important, valid, answers. And I think it's not an eye opener for the sector for people with disability, but those who are not part of the disability sector will definitely be an eye opener and so on. Rahul, how are you? I think I must share this. Rahul and I, we stayed in the same house in Delhi at different times. We rented the same house. He moved to move to Rhodes for his education, and that's when I moved to Delhi and stayed there. And things. So, how are you? Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Of course.
And
thanks for having me.
yes, very quickly, you're somebody who's very closely following education and have been involved from quite some time. You heard us and the issue around education and people with disabilities and so on. Welcome, Honorable Member of Parliament, Mr. Gaurav Gogoi. Thank you so much for joining us. So Rahul, very quickly, so where do you think you heard about the UDICE data where we are?
Yes,
we are on that, and hardly any number at the higher education. So why are people with disabilities missing from the education system? What do you think should be done? What is the core problems around it?
So first of all, thanks very much, Arman, for having me here. It's an honor to be part of this discussion. So to your specific question about the UDICE data on dropouts and high dropout rates of children with disabilities, why that is happening and what we can do about it. So I think, the fundamental point really is that, so there are a number of interventions for mainstreaming children with disabilities that have been outlined in various government policies, such as having resource persons at the block level, making sure that examination systems are modified to meet the needs of children with disabilities, providing counseling to parents, etc. But some of these measures have not been, of course, when we talk about these kinds of things, the lack of implementation is always a major issue. So I guess that's one thing that needs to be done, and we need to have targeted interventions to make sure that, for instance, for children with disabilities in mainstream schools, they have special educators, that they are given the targeted support that they need. Now, for example, Justice Bhatt talked about this recent Supreme Court judgment in Rajneesh Kumar Pandey's case, where they said that a pupil-teacher ratio of 1:5 should be maintained, and the Right to Education Act needs to be amended to facilitate that. The other thing about the RTE Act is also that even though it has a definition of inclusive education, the parameters that are laid down, which all schools have to mandatorily comply with, do not include things which would make reading materials accessible and everything else accessible.
Yeah. So
the bottom line really is that I would say that getting the child in a mainstream school is only the first step. If they're only going to sit idly by, then that's not really taking matters.
Yeah, Rahul, you are included when you are there. So you get included in the school or be a part of a school and an inclusive education when you are able to reach school. So the idea of education for children with disability, largely people want to send children to schools which are running various disability school, like deaf should go to deaf school, blind should go to blind school, and so on. So this needs to go away. And another point, only expensive private schools now are doing this inclusive education, mainstreaming
in a meaningful way.
and very expensive also, the big names also including it. But that's not a solution. So what
Right.
do you think is need to be done? I think very short answer for this, please.
It's hard to answer that at that level of abstraction. I don't think I can say anything more than the normal watchwords which we hear in these kinds of conversations about training, sensitization, and making sure that we create pathways for such children to be able to get into these schools, all kinds of schools and mainstream schools, and thrive once they get there.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rahul. I think I've already overshot time. I will come to Kavya Mukhija. I think Kavya is a young fellow with is a fellow with NCP-EDP. She just got into the Javed Abedi NCP-EDP fellowship this year. So Kavya, with India being a country with the youngest population in the world, what are your aspirations for the youth with disabilities in the countries?
So firstly, thank you so much for having me here. To answer that question, here is another question. How many of us are Bollywood fans here? Give me a cheer.
How many are Bollywood fans?
Bollywood fans, Bollywood movies. Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's surprising.
Very surprising. You can't hear you guys, please. How many of you are Bollywood fans? Yeah, okay.
Okay, now that's quite a good number. So there's this movie, Ye Jawani Hai Diwani, उसमें एक dialogue है रणबीर कपूर का, which goes like, मैं उड़ना चाहता हूँ, गिरना चाहता हूँ, फिसलना चाहता हूँ, बस रुकना ही नहीं चाहता. So I think this is the motto that youth with disabilities in India carry. We want to move forward. We want to explore places. We want to achieve things. We want to do things. We want to try and, experience new things. But we are held back. Hum ruke hue hain. And we are held back by barriers. So very recently, I was at a family function and one of the relatives asked me that, so they asked me, they saw that I'm a wheelchair user and they asked me that, aapki bhi koi hobbies hai? I was taken aback, ki meri hobbies kyun nahi hongi? Am I alien or something? I mean, why will I not sing? Why will I not dance? Why will I not read books? So I think the youth today aspires to go out. I mean, if I want to try out a cafe, I should be able to do that. So there's this cafe in Jaipur. I live in Jaipur and there's this cafe which has a beautiful picturesque scene of the Hawa Mahal. I want to go there, but I can't because it's inaccessible. It's on the topmost floor and there's no lift, no ramp to go there. So in this case, the youth is, the aspirations of the youth is not something out of the box of youth with disabilities. We just want to live a dignified, respectable life and life of dignity as humans, not as gods.
So how often are you able to go to your friend's house?
Not very often because they don't live in accessible spaces. So what I have to do is that I call them at my place. So we have a good time there or I don't go.
So all your outings only in malls and 5-star hotels?
Yes. And living a life as a person with disability is very expensive. Very, very expensive.
So imagine the plight of people and young youth with disabilities living in the poor rural areas, smaller towns. They don't even see the light of the day. I mean, people like me and Kavya, or, for that one, Javed and Rahul and so on. We come from a fairly well-to-do background. We've received education. Our parents were supportive. We are fighting, this evil of stigma around people with disability. I mean, I would want to, any one of you, if you could name one city or one town in the country which is completely accessible to people with disability. I can get out of my house, use a public transport, reach school, reach my workplace of work, or go to watch a cinema independently. Nothing. Where are we then? This is the reason why millions of people with disabilities are missing. Just last one word or one sentence answer from each of the panelists. Meenu, I want you to say, what do you think should be done? What is plaguing the disabled people in the country? Just one sentence, we need to wind it up.
We want visibility. Simple.
Rahul? Constructive incremental change. That's deep. Jayad bhai? Mike, please.
I can say wake up disability sector. We have to wake up others. Otherwise, nobody will come and save us. We have
Thank
to
you
wake
so much, Kavya.
I think I would say that there is a lack of awareness and understanding. So we need disability to be taught in schools from a very young age.
Thank you so much, each one of you, Meenu, Smita, Rahul, Javed, and Kavya for this time. And thank you. Over to you, Sangeeta ji.
Excellent panel. That was so inspiring, learned so much. And yeah, interesting. Inspiring as in thought-provoking, I should say. Thought-provoking. Thank you very much, Armanji and all the wonderful panelists. Friends, we move on to the next panel discussion. Friends, we've been joined by the Honorable Member of Parliament, Mr. Gaurav Gogoi. May I request you, sir, to please come up on stage for the launch of the book Invisible Majority, authored by Mr. V.R. Feroz. And I'd like to request Mr. Som Mittal, Mr. Arman Ali, and Mr. V.R. Feroz to join him on stage. Warm welcome to Mr. Gaurav Gogoi, Honorable Member of Parliament. Let's put our hands together. There are two people who want the book. Great. One is me. So, no problem. What's your name? Okay, sure. The book has been authored by Ma'am C.K. Minaji. So,
yeah.
Right. May I request you, Mr. Gaurav Gogoi, to please say a few words.
Thank you, Arman, for inviting me here. Thank you to Mr. Mittal for telling me about today's event and about the panelists who were on stage before me. And thank you to C.K. Meena and V.R. Feroz for writing this important book. And I'm glad it has a foreword by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I want to congratulate the civil society for doing the phenomenal work that they have been doing for the past so many years, raising important questions, forcing everyone to think hard on how much we've achieved and how much more we have to go. I also want to thank all the champions and all the ambassadors who in their own lives are creating conversations around the differently able sector, around differently able people, all those who are showing through their sheer grit, courage, optimism, creativity, spark about how much the world is brighter and richer when there is a space for equality and equity. And in terms of challenges of equality and equity, I think we all, in our different worlds, we all face and ask the same questions that were asked in the panel before. When I was listening to some of the concepts and the answers and the principles, it's something similar to what I hear in a panel when we're talking about the Northeast, from the part of India from where I am. This is how can we be more visible, and how can people learn about us? Why don't people intermingle? Why don't there's more visibility of us? Why don't people read about us in the school and education sector and in the textbooks? And I think in those answers is what we have to do. I think in each and every field, in each and every aspect of society, we need to, have certain principles of openness, of inclusiveness, of equality and equity. And when we have those principles in terms of framing legislation, or in terms of framing policies, or in terms of designing cities, or in terms of designing educational spaces, if we have those core principles at heart, if we have those core values at heart, then we maybe possibly do the best in terms of leaving no one behind, in making feel that this space is open and welcomes everyone. And I don't, there is a romanticization that takes place, and I'm a bit wary of that. I would take my own example. There's a romanticization of the Northeast of India. There is a sense of victimization and victimhood, and I understand that. I understand where that's coming from. But if I were to take the example of the Northeast of my lived experience, then I think agents of change, or change happens through positive examples. Change happens through icons. Change happens through alliances. Change happens through cross-section of people coming together, not only civil society or educationists, but also artists, also authors, also music, also sports. And it's, the entire, whole of society approach. That's how we get change, when we have interconnections, and we don't live in silos. We don't live in silos of what Arman said, that, this is the group of, deaf children, this is the group of blind children. When we live in silos and we advocate as in silos, then we can reach a certain point, but I don't think we reach the transformative point. The transformative point comes when, there is an intersection that happens. And then, there are these core principles of equity and openness and inclusiveness and joy. I think we have to be, again, very, while we acknowledge the sense of injustice and we stand in solidarity, but, there has to be a sense of joy, there has to be a sense of positivity, there has to be a sense of creativity, because essentially what we're trying to do is create a new world. Essentially, what we're trying to do is create a new society. We're trying to create a new school system, a new music system, a new sports system, a new urban planning system. So we have to be creative. So when you're creative, you have to be passionate, you have to be consumed by that idea, and you have to think positively. If you are operating from a sense of only if you are operating from a sense of outrage, while that outrage is morally justified, it will also limit. So we all have to co-create, and we also have to acknowledge our responsibility as a parliamentarian, as a member of parliament. I acknowledge my responsibility that how much in the parliament have we raised questions about the differently able sector? How many times have we raised questions about from the ministries? In fact, there was during the question hour, there was one of the questions was related to the Ministry of Women and Child. And I wanted to ask that, how, we all have heard that during COVID that their children have called the child helpline numbers out of distress, but how many have those helplines have received calls from differently able children or women for that matter? And I think, therefore, the parliament needs to be a space of transparency and accountability. The beauty of a democracy is that the information is accessible and information is available and information is there for everyone to use. And I think that's why whether it's the title of the book, which is The Invisible Majority, or whether the concept behind this event, which is the missing millions, I think that's very powerful because, and especially thought-provoking for us or for me as a parliamentarian, because definitely the House of the People is when we qualify ourselves as the House of the People, this is the house of everyone. And everyone must feel that their voices are heard. Everyone must feel that they are being spoken for, their questions are raised, and everyone must feel represented as well. And in one day it would be, I think, an extremely powerful symbol that in the House of Lok Sabha or in the House of Rajya Sabha, that we have a member of parliament who is from the differently able community. I think that would be a very powerful day, and I hope that day comes soon as well. And I think it behoves for all of us, and definitely I, not only in my own individual path as a parliamentarian, but I'll definitely try to inculcate this sense of awareness, because we ourselves have to be aware first. We have to, it's my responsibility to learn. It's not, I can't ask always for the differently able community to come and teach me and tell me. It's as much as my responsibility to learn about it and learn about the experiences and learn about the aspirations and learn about the expectations myself. And not only for me, and for some of us, I think the role is also to broaden that sense of awareness with our fellow parliamentarians, with our fellow MPs, take it to the chairman of the standing committees, take it to the ministers. So, what I just want to say that count me as your ally in parliament, and I'll try and do my best to ensure that the voices and aspirations and expectations of this community is heard in the parliament, which is your parliament. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gogoi. Well spoken, and let's hope that with your support, NCPDP and the entire sector will have some of the hopes that you spoke about realized. Friends, we now move on to the second panel discussion, which is titled Bridging the Gap for Persons with Disabilities, Perspectives from Employers, Governments, Civil Society, and Political Leaders. Let me take this opportunity to introduce the moderator, Mr. George Abraham, CEO, SCORE Foundation. George Abraham is a social entrepreneur, inspirational speaker, and a disability rights activist. He launched cricket for the blind in India in 1990. He set up the World Blind Cricket Council and was elected as its founding chairman in 1996. He conceived and organized the inaugural World Cup of Cricket for the Blind in 1998 in New Delhi. George set up SCORE Foundation and launched Project iWay, a a single-stop knowledge resource on living a life with blindness. George has co-authored the book, A Handbook of Inclusive Education in 2004, which was published by Sage Publications. George is an Ashoka Fellow and carried the Olympic torch at Atlanta in 1996. Let's have a round of applause for George Abraham. The panelists for the discussion will include Ms. Karishma Chabra, Lead Accessibility and Strategic Initiatives, Microsoft India. Karishma Chabra is a management and business law graduate with over 16 years of industry experience across varied work streams like accessibility, policy advocacy, government and legal affairs, statutory compliance, business management and operations. She leads accessibility and strategic initiatives in her current job at Microsoft India. She is an active speaker at various public and private forums on digital inclusion and accessibility. Karishma also serves as a member on various accessibility inclusion committees with India's leading industry associations like CII and FICCI. Warm welcome, Karishma Chabra. Joining us online, Mr. Balakrishna Venkatesh. Mr. Balakrishna Venkatesh, or Venki, as he's popularly called, joined the development sector in 1980, having worked in the corporate sector for 7 years and in academia for 1 year, and founded Action on Disability and Development India, ADD India, in 1989. He pioneered mainstreaming disability into existing rural development initiatives in South India. From 1997, he's been a consultant and trainer, president of the CBR Global Network, founder, voluntary convener of Indian Forum for Rehabilitation and Assistive Technology. Warm welcome to you, Balakrishna Venkatesh. Joining us online, Mr. Raveendra Singh, CEO, Skill Council for Persons with Disability. Raveendra Singh has an experience of over 26 years in corporate and skill development sector in India. He's associated with the Skill Council for Persons with Disability as the CEO. Raveendra also led the Skill Council for the mining sector as CEO, has been a member of the Expert Committee for Geospatial Sector of the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, member STCC Mining. Also served as a consultant for Directorate General for Mine Safety. Welcome to you, Mr. Raveendra Singh. Joining us, Ms. Shilpi Kapoor, CEO, Barrier Break. Shilpi is a serial entrepreneur with a passion for technology and disability. She's the founder of Barrier Break and 247 accessible documents that focuses on digital accessibility. She has been recognized as one of the top 15 women transforming India by Niti Aayog in 2019 and as one of the top 20 most powerful women in business for the year 2017. Shilpi Kapoor, an Ashoka Fellow and a recipient of the NCPDP Shell Helen Keller Award 2008. We are also joined by Ms. Joyce Bowen, Chief of Education Unit, UNESCO, New Delhi office. With a background in political science and international relations, Joyce joined UNESCO in 2002 and comes with 18 years of UNESCO headquarters experience, including working with the education sector's executive office and its division of peace and sustainable development. She has also worked on the Global Citizenship Education Program and on thematic areas such as peace and human rights education, reconciliation, nationalism, education for international understanding, and prevention of violent extremism. Joyce comes from Indonesia, and prior to joining UNESCO, she worked in the Asia Society's Texas Center in Houston. Ms. Joyce Bowen. On the panel is also Mr. V.R. Feroz, Senior Vice President, Head of SAP Academy for Engineering, SAP SE. Based in Palo Alto, Feroz heads the SAP Academy for Engineering. He formerly headed the Globalization Services Unit and was responsible for enabling the global adoption of SAP products worldwide. Feroz was also managing director of SAP Labs India. Starting at the age of 33, in the next 5 years, he transformed SAP Labs India into an innovation hub. Feroz is the chairperson on the board of Special Listern USA, a not-for-profit foundation. He's also the founder of India Inclusion Foundation, a non-profit that aims to bring the topic of inclusion to the forefront in India. Feroz has co-authored the best-selling book on people with disabilities, Gifted. And of course, welcome, Mr. Feroz. Joining us virtually, Pradyana Desai, Managing Director, Accenture. Ms. Desai is an IT professional with substantial experience of driving complex technology programs and is responsible for telecommunications, media, and high-tech industry technology business in UKI. She is a certified master technology architect and telecommunications domain expert. And now I request Mr. George Abraham to moderate the session, Bridging the Gap for Persons with Disabilities. Over to you, George.
Is it okay if I just took off my mask? Yep. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, NCP-EDP, for inviting me onto the panel and asking me to moderate this discussion. I've been in the disability, working in the disability sector since 1990, and have had the privilege of knowing Javed Abidi from almost the start of his mission, and have been associated with him in some of his campaigns, including the Census of India campaign, inclusion in the Census of India campaign in 2001. It's amazing that people with disability were not counted before that. So, so in the last 3 decades, there have been several policies, acts, programs, conventions, which have been launched globally as well as in India. And India have been very quick on, for example, to approve the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disability. India has been very quick to kind of ratify it. But I'd like to keep 2 or 3 points on the table before I move to the panelists. Number one, in spite of the laws being in place, the policies may be being in place, there is problems with general awareness about disability. There's a problem with attitudes that people have towards disability. There's a problem with the understanding that people have towards disability. There is a problem with access. Now, access is not just access to websites and access to buildings, but also things like access to education, access to health services, and so on and so forth. Access to being a citizen of this country. There's problem. And maybe I might stick my neck out and say that probably there's a problem with the accountability of implementation and so on. That's one. The second thing is that the way the country is run, the people who manage the country are different from the people who actually manage and work for disability. And as a result, the people who run the country very often totally forget about the fact that people with disability also exist in the country as citizens. And that happened when the demonetization happened. Suddenly, overnight, the currency and the coins became inaccessible for blind people. So it obviously, later on when courts came into play and so on, if the country had to redesign the currency notes and the coins, it meant another demonetization. And if that happened, then we, the disabled people, would have been called the villains of the peace. So that's the second thing I wanted to say. And I had actually conceived this evening panel starting with in the order that I was given the list of names, and the first name given to me was my good friend Firoz. So I'm going to stick to that order rather than change the order. Is that okay with the panelists? Okay. So Firoz is a father of a person with a person with disability. He is an employer. He is a person who has traveled widely. He's also written extensively about disability. Every time I meet him, there is a new book that he has published. The last time I met him, it was gifted. Today is the invisible majority. So, Firoz, the question to you is, in your innings so far, you've done a lot of work to actually further the cause of people with disability. What are your learnings and what are the challenges or gaps that you've seen? And I would also include the last question, which instead of going a second round, I would ask you the second question also. What do you think are the possible solutions and the way forward? Now, in the interest of time, I'm told we have about 40 minutes and we are 7 of us. So maybe 4 minutes.
Yeah. So the answer depends on how much time I have. So I can speak for 4 hours as well.
No, 4 minutes. 4 minutes.
Yeah. So let me keep it to 4 minutes.
The good thing is no 4 seconds. It's 4 minutes.
Yeah. So let me start by wearing the hat of a corporate person, right? So let me start about employment, which is where I have the most experience, and then I'll try to go to awareness. I'll just try to give you 2 specific points. The first thing from an employment perspective is that people with disabilities has to differentiate and bring business value. Otherwise, it will not work. Okay. We started the Autism at Work program at SAP, which is considered one of the most landmark announcements ever made by a corporate for people with disabilities. This was done in the year 2013, where we said we'll hire 1% of our global workforce across the world with people on the autism spectrum. So we were 5,000 people. We made a commitment to hire 650 people who are on the autism spectrum. Way back in 2013, we have already hired 220 people across the world full-time and another 220 people part-time. This has never happened before. What is even more interesting is that more than 100 companies has followed SAP's incredible landmark announcement, and they've started hiring people on the autism spectrum. I wrote the press brief way back in 2013 because they had no clue what I was talking about, because I'd hired people on the autism spectrum and had shown that they are better than my regular engineers. You have to have data to prove that they are not just as good, but they can be better. Once you had data, there was enough evidence for businesses to actually hire people because they were differentiating. And the press brief that I wrote had one statement, that innovation happens at the edges. You have to bring people who think differently into the organization if you want to be an innovative company. We were not trying to say that this is good to do just because it's part of a D&I initiative. Actually, we believe that it should not be part of the D&I initiative. It should be a business win-win situation for everybody. So that's the first thing that I want to say, that employment will work at scale only if you are able to bring and prove that it is differentiating and it is good from a business point of view. Even though the program started in 2013, the aha moment for me was in the year 2019, where after running the program for 6 years, for the first time in SAP's history, we're a 100,000 people company, $120 billion market cap. We do something called the Annual Innovation Awards, which is called the Founder Awards, which means out of 100,000 employees, one team is selected who gets this award for breakthrough innovation. For the first time, SAP made an exception and gave that award not to a team, but an individual. And guess what? The individual was hired from the Autism at Work program. So here is a person on the autism spectrum who stood out better than everybody else. Once that happened, there was evidence that you can bring business value. And now everybody wants to have people on the autism spectrum. That's the strategy we have to take, that the best minds not only are, but also could come from any part of the society. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing, now I'm jumping to awareness building. And the reason why I keep writing books, almost everybody keeps telling me, Feroz, why don't you write a book on leadership? I say every Tom, Dick and Harry writes a book on leadership. There are more books on leadership than real leaders. So I don't want to write on leadership. I will write on disability because nobody wants to write on disability. My first book, it was funny because when I wrote Gifted, no publisher wanted to publish it because they said it's not a viable topic. Because the people with disabilities, you don't have to tell them anyway, they are fully aware of it. The others are not interested. And I said, that's the wrong attitude. You have to mainstream the topic of disability. It cannot be to the 2.2% of the people with disabilities. You have to mainstream it. When I wrote The Invisible Majority, I wanted to tell the publisher that this can be a mainstream bestseller because everybody should be concerned about disability. And guess what? Today the book launched. It was launched 2 weeks back on Amazon for pre-order. It is a #1 bestseller on Amazon. And that is how you bring a difference to disability, because it is everybody's business to know about disability, because it's not 15%. And that's the reason I've said it's the invisible majority. It is not the largest minority. I think it is the biggest majority in the world, because whether you like it or not, if you live long enough, you will get disabled. And so it is everybody's moral obligation to understand about disability. That's all I want to say. Thank you, George. I give you back 2 minutes.
Thank you. I think I like the words business case, innovation, strength or talent to be found in diversity. And maybe the approach to writing your book is just go out and do it. And do it with conviction. Now, staying on the theme of corporate employment and corporate the corporate theme, I'd like to go to Karishma, who is with Microsoft. Microsoft over the years has been having a culture, has developed a culture of inclusive in inclusion. It's also the products, many of the products that you come out with are also accessible and or towards accessible, gravitating towards being accessible. And you've also been kind of very proactive when it comes to hiring. So what have been some of your learnings? What are some of the issues that you've come across, and what are some of the newer things that you would like to do to bridge the gaps, if any? You need the mic?
Thank you for the question, George. And thank you, Arman, for having me here. And congratulations on Missing Millions. I think you're famous for taking these bold steps. And we're proud to be a part of this event here today. Coming to the question, George, I think Microsoft has been on this journey of accessibility for a very long time. This is not something new for us. Early 90s, Bill Gates talked about our first commitment. Ever since, we've had our technology. We had sticky keys in those early days. If somebody is a Windows user, they would remember. And so on and so forth. We continue to develop our technology. But along this journey, there have been several learnings we've had because we've also had challenges. We've fallen, stood up, and learned from those. But I think what made us accelerate this was our Satya Nadella, our CEO, when he announced in 2014, when he actually made accessibility a part of our mission statement of empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. So when we say every person and every organization, we actually want to include everyone in. Nobody should be left behind. And that's where accessibility became even more mainstream. And then we had a very structured approach of including accessibility into everything that we do. We had our chief accessibility officer who joined us in 2016. And we sort of had an hub and spoke model where every part of the organization has to be included into what's happening on accessibility. We have a four sort of pronged approach, right from culture to systems, processes, and innovation for future. So when we talk about culture, I mean, everybody would know that Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So when you have a strong culture, that's where it starts. And the culture starts with the leadership. When our leadership takes the ownership that they have to drive this, it actually cascades down to the organization. And I think that's what was a key driver for us, that our leadership stood up and said that accessibility has to be mainstream for us. We include it in our systems, our processes. When we talk about culture, we have hackathon culture, where we are actually promoting innovation of new technology. And you wouldn't believe in last so many years, the number of hacks that have happened on accessibility is just amazing. It almost doubles and triples every year for us. And that's such a big strength for Microsoft, that we have people who actually care. Coming to our systems and products, it's not just about, okay, we are building a technology and we have a product or a platform and we ship it out for our customers. We actually take ownership. We heard accountability from you. Shri Gogoi talked about it, and you talked about it. I think accountability is imperative here, and it comes with a responsibility. So we took a responsibility that it's not just about shipping that product out of the door, but really having to hear from people, the users who are there, take the feedback. And then we launched something called a Disability Answer Desk, which is available in more than 16 markets globally for Microsoft, where we are actually listening to what issues are persons with disabilities facing with our technology. How can we improve every day to make their lives more empowered? And then coming on to innovating for future, we all know artificial intelligence is playing a big role everywhere today. We have an application called Seeing AI, which is a free app on iOS. And it's such a wonderful app that allows a person with visual disability to actually navigate a world around them. And the reason I'm talking about this, I think these are small examples, but it actually tells you how big a role technology is playing to create that inclusion. And especially now, when we are in this hybrid world, and today's event itself is such a big example. We have people online, we are sitting here, but everything is seamless. And if technology is there to empower everyone, everybody should be able to leverage that. That's been our goal. And the most important learning through all of this for us has been that accessibility has to be built in and not bolted on. And therefore, it is built in into our culture, system, process, and what we innovate for future. We don't want that it should be that something comes out and we're just trying to retrofit accessibility, and it doesn't work. It obviously is an additional cost. It is it's effort wasted, so many resources that we put behind it. So it is always beneficial. And the last thing I want to cover, which my fellow panelists also talked about, the business opportunity. I think it's high time we look at accessibility, disability inclusion as something which is creating opportunities for everybody, for businesses and for people with disabilities, whether it is hiring of talent. 1 billion plus people is not it's not a small number, and it is growing every day because we all are aging. Someone at some point in their life will have a disability, and even 70% of them are invisible, we all know. So I think it's important that if we have to create that equitable environment, it is important for us to have a business imperative. Accessibility is not a charity. It is something that we create opportunities for organizations and to hire talent, to grow their business, including people with disabilities. And that's what Microsoft has been doing. We have, in fact, something called a maturity model. After learning from several studies and maturity models, Microsoft has come up with this maturity model, which has 4 stages and some around 8 parameters. And there is nothing sequential. Anybody who's on their journey of accessibility can just take and run with it, and we are open to sharing with people. It really covers the strategy, how we really take accessibility as a business problem and solve for it, right from culture to strategy to building a supply chain to having product development, all up, all inclusive. So that's available, and we are sharing it with people and customers and partners and governments around the world. And last but not least, I think no one person can do this. All of this, we heard about alliances. Not one organization, not one government, not one person can achieve the goal that we are setting ourselves out for. It is a partnership-driven model, and that's why we partner with many governments, industry bodies, civil societies around the world to make a difference. In the end, I just want to say that when we decide to include intentionally, we do not exclude unintentionally. I think that's very, very important to consider.
Thank you, Karishma. Include intentionally. And the other thing which I would like to underline is the bond, which is when you design something, accessibility should be part of the brief. We'll now go to one of our online panelists, Mr. Venkatesh Venki. He's had four decades of experience in the disability sector, and he's been working at the grassroots level with rural people with disability in rural India, with rural communities, and with people who are poverty. And I would like Venki for you to kind of share with us your experience and the challenges that you see in implementing the various government. Are the government programs reaching the grassroots? Are the policies, the various schemes like Accessible India, Swachh Bharat, Skill India, and the various other programs of the government, do they actually reach the rural masses? And what are the challenges that you would like to underline for this house? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arman. Thank you, George. The first barrier for persons with disabilities is environment they come in. It seems very obvious, but doesn't take very long. With persistent effort to work with families with disabilities or others with disabilities to move their butt, you may say that. For that, the approach that I have been practicing for the last 34 years to encourage disabled people to form their own self-help groups. That the space becomes where they are accepted for what they are and not rejected for what they are not, where they are able to identify what they need and find solution, willing to act. This way of thinking has ensured that in the district where I live, there are more than 1,000 self-help groups of disabled people and family members of disabled people. The district of Anantapur, each of these self-help groups are supported by village level personnel. It is constant of working with them and holding ensures that they are able to stand up for themselves, accept that the responsibility of development is not with any themselves, with the individual and with the collective of small organizations. And these organizations have come together, formed their own OPD, BPOs at the taluk level, and with the district federation of cross disability people in this district, with a membership of over 30,000 people. Each member pays 12 rupees to the district federation. The district federation has an income of its own. It is not corporate, but it pays. When they pay your tax and you hold account. Therefore, this accountability is built in this movement right from the beginning. Holding people to account is not the government. Individuals have to hold themselves to account and their own associations to account. Accountability begins with the person, not outside. The other important factor that has contributed for the disability DNA to be in the community is that these individual disabled persons and their family members, other groups, women's groups, agricultural laborers groups, farmers groups, they are visible. So I have a serious problem. Persons with disability and those who are nothing about us without us. I would say nothing about us without all of us. This acceptance and inclusion of persons with disabilities is become a reality when persons with disabilities take responsibility for themselves and for other members of the community. Very often, I have seen in other places where the whole village may be concerned about lack of drinking water. But the DPO in that area would be talking about inclusion and accessibility. And so long as disabled people don't engage with the immediate community, like I don't think disabled people's representation in campaigns on climate change, women's empowerment, protecting forests, any of these movements, we don't see disabled people. In so long as we don't engage as disabled people movement, we will remain excluded. If you are exclusive, you cannot be included. This is a fundamental principle. So, in accessing entitlements, this district of Anantapur is one of the leading districts that successfully included persons with disability National Employment Council. And in food security, land rights, and voting rights, and all of these things, we see a difference in this district because of the work that has been going on for nearly 30 years. So, the civil society, if we disabled people find themselves in a place they are in, it is an indictment on us. We've not done our job. So our job is to promote disability in promoting, so long as we don't include others. We will be talking the same story 2 decades down the line. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I hope, thank you, Venki. There are 3 things that I'd like to underline from what Venkatesh said. One is that people with disability need to take responsibility, be accountable to themselves, and that's one. Number 2, yes, it's nothing about us without us, but it's also the community to be involved. And the third thing that he said, which was very important, is that people with disability in the community have not just to think about disability and their rights, but also participate in other issues that involve the community, like climate change. It could be literacy, general literacy, it could be poverty alleviation, it could be whatever. And apparently, Venkatesh says the Anandpur district, they have actually been able to successfully do it. So thank you very much, Venkatesh, for your inputs.
George, 1 minute. So, George and other panelists, I'm sorry, I have to. I'll leave this forum now.
We appreciate that. We understand that, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah. So very quickly we move to the next speaker. We go back to corporate. We just want to finish the theme of corporate India. Radhana Desai, I hope I've got the name right. She's the Managing Director, Institution from Accenture. And I've heard a lot about the efforts Accenture has done in terms of hiring and disability access and so on. So, Radhana, could you tell us a little bit about what you've done, what are your learnings, and what are the focus on what are the challenges and gaps that you actually faced?
Sure. Thanks, George. And
keep 4 minutes, please.
I will. Okay. First of all, a big thanks for having me here. I've been really, I enjoyed everything that I witnessed today. I see a couple of, familiar faces. Firoz, hi. Good to see you here. I've been associated with the Disability Inclusion Charter for a while, and I stand today for Accenture. You said it, George, we do a lot of work here. We're not new to the charter in terms of, enabling accessibility and driving an inclusive culture. But the ones that I want to specifically talk about today here is to acknowledge everything that I heard earlier while there are a privileged few who would have access to technology training early in their lives, get the opportunity to be part of corporate campus, interviews and get into the mainstream work, there are real grassroots challenges. Early last year, we agreed our commitment comes from the top. Julie Sweet, our CEO, has publicly, talked about her commitment towards this, signed the ILO. All of that is in place, and we are extremely, I think, on a leading path when it comes to, are we ready to have an inclusion charter for disability? We do. But unfortunate situation remains that I'm responsible for the India implementation and commitment of this charter. The problem begins with the fact that there are people who may not have access to the training. I, as a business sponsor, need to take the ownership of, not just employing people, but also making it a sustainable career option for them to succeed on their own. So I'll quickly talk about 4 things that we're doing. Everything else in place, we're talking about, enable the team, which means, take care and ensure the level playing field. Accessibility remains our commitment to ensure that people have the right to work, right to employment, and there are no things, and we try and bridge that gap. So we've made a lot of investments into physical systems, into technology, into the attitude of the surrounding ecosystem that they would operate in. Employing them, which means that we create job opportunities, we go break the barriers, the things that we've adopted from SAP, breaking barriers, including neurodiverse people into our job roles, engage our clients to actually, create role opportunities. The third part is to ensure that we keep them sort of, empowered. Unless individual sort of uses that, for their own advantage, the early seeding, the opportunity that we create for them to empower their own future career, I think the sustenance wouldn't be real. And the final part of it is engage them. It is not, we are not talking about hiring people for a year or two. We are talking about a career that would span 30, 35 years of an individual's life. How do they sort of go through the journey of not just learning, entering, but surviving and sort of, going through all the trainings that they would probably have missed in the formative years, which could be about, building your personality, getting the leadership mileage, understanding, what business things, anything that would have probably not been part of it. That's what we are focusing on, George. The challenge you asked me, is it for real? It is for real, a very limited supply pool that helps us sort of, get to the, bridge the gap between the seekers and the providers. Here we are the seekers here. We really want to reach out to as many as possible. But that challenge remains for real if I talk about the India subcontinent here. And that's what we are thriving this year. Hopefully, we really want to, reach out and say that, we'll try and bridge the gap of if we can make it accessible and, really enable for you. Lastly, I just want to emphasize on a part that we don't want to stop at enablement. We want to take it to a real experience. I heard what Kavya said earlier, if you want to fly, then we really want to make it absolutely, conducive for anybody and everyone. So that's what I'll just stop here in interest of time.
Thank you. I think the talent pool is a challenge that you outlined. There's Joyce Bowen here from UNESCO. Inclusive education became a big thing in the mid-90s, and special education, of course, has been traditionally around. But still, if we look at people with disability who are educated, it still seems to be a very small number. Joyce, could you tell us what are the challenges that you as an educationist see in the country which needs to be addressed? Because education is the training ground for human resource.
Thank you very much. And it's not really fair that I'm in such a panel of high, number one, qualified panelists, and number two, I'm relatively new. So I'm going to try something, if you would allow me, even though it's a little bit over 4 minutes. Sabse pahle mai NCP EUDP or Arman Ali ji, Executive Director, Ko Surya Adakartihun for inviting me today for this meeting. But thank you very much. Yes. So what I'm privileged to bring today is UNESCO's point of view, and I've heard all the keywords: data, partnership, agency, accountability, and I think that's exactly what is the problem, the issue of changing mindsets, inclusion. As you know, there is the Sustainable Development Goals that's being pushed, and all member states of the United Nations are going for it. And for us, UNESCO, and we are the agency that's working on education, it's the issue also of what kind of education do we want for the future, not just for now, but not just for 2030, but for onwards. What is quality education? We've heard all these terms about inclusion, about equality, but if the changing of the mindset doesn't happen, all these beautiful policies will not necessarily take root. That's one. But to make a long story short, the issue of data actually is a very important one. What we've been noticing all over is that we have all of this information, but it's never captured. The population with disabilities is a very difficult issue to capture. The number of people who would willingly say, for whatever reason, that I have a disability, my community has people that has disabilities, it's actually a very brave thing to do. And I don't know if everyone can do it. Already, the colleagues that are here, you're very brave, and I commend you. And it's exactly this that needs to happen through partnerships with the corporations, with private sectors, with policymakers, with international organizations, because as everybody has said, we can't do this alone. But in order for us to sort of have agency and lasting and something that's sustained, we need to bring everybody's comparative advantages. The youth, you have your energy, you've got your spunk, you've got your voices, you've got your social media, you've got everything for you. Do it, go for it. Greta Thunberg, she is a living proof. So you call your friends, you chat, you Insta, everything. The corporations, you hire, you acknowledge that these are valuable, these are perhaps sometimes even more smarter than able-bodied people, and that they have something that is not, even though not yet captured, it's equally valuable. And for international organizations that, like the UN, we can be seen as neutral partners that bring everyone on the table, have a dialogue, start the dialogue at least. And hopefully this will also change mindsets. Also, changing mindsets because of education needs partnership of everyone that's working on education, including teachers, because teachers also need to have a changed mindset. Parents, we know, teachers, educators, school managers, we need to show that this is not something that you need to hide. This is equally valuable. This is something actually, without them, you would not be able to know the other side of what it is, of what education, inclusive education is all about. So I hope I'm able to bring a little bit of what we as international organizations like to push for education, what the education that we like. And the last point very quickly is that there's also another invisible disability, which is the mental health. One very last thing, quick thing, because of COVID, we understand so much now that students, learners, they had a hard time learning loss, especially so for the populations with disabilities. It's tough. So hopefully we're able to reach that together with partnerships and everybody around the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joyce. They say technology is a great leveler, and when Digital India and all that started happening, we thought our problems would be solved very, very quickly. But Shilpi, tell us what are the gaps and what are the problems and what are the issues that are holding us back?
Got it. So okay, so I'm going to talk from Javed Abidi. Javed always said, Shilpi focused first on policy, laws, and standards. After that, implementation will happen. Every time I fought him on it, he told me that just do this, dream big, write everything you want to write, let them cut it if they don't want it there. I think we have everything from that perspective. We have the laws, we have the standards, we have the guidelines, we have policies in place. We don't have implementation. That is our only gap. What do we need? A chief accessibility officer for India. Sorry, I'm dreaming big. We need a Nandan Nilekani for Aadhaar. We need something like that, somebody like that for India. We need somebody to stand and say, I'm going to go through every government department. I'm going to stand, and this person has to be like in the government and be empowered to be able to do things. And we need to take that forward. I could never have imagined, I've been pushing this cause since 2004, with Javed since 2007. And I can tell you that I'm impressed that for the first time, NIC and MIT have an innovation challenge to create a web accessibility reporting tool for the government. Yes, they don't want to buy an international product, whatever government's reasons for that. But at least for the first time, I have seen them put money where it's needed. NIC and MIT are putting out 2 crores in awards to make this happen. We've just announced 5 finalists today to go from stage 1 to stage 2 to create a POC. Never happened till now. So what do we need? Monitoring. We need DPOs to question. We need DPOs to make the government accountable, corporates accountable, industry accountable. And with monitoring, we need incentives. And that is what we need. We have everything else as a building block of foundation. That's the missing piece. That is where we need to go. That's it.
Thank you, Shilpi. It was a very disciplined delivery. Thank you very much. And so we have one more speaker, and that's the last speaker for the evening. It's Raveendra Singh from the Skill Sector Council for Persons with Disability. And Skill India has been the pet project of our Prime Minister. And Raveendra Singh is heading the organization which is driving the disability part of it. So Ravi, are you there? Yeah, so Ravi, tell us what are the challenges that you're grappling with to actually take this mandate forward?
So when one looks at addressing it, it's like India is a humongous length and breadth in terms of the spread, in terms of sectors, in terms of geographies, languages, and as you keep moving from sector to sector and geography to geography, you have multiple challenges coming up. The biggest challenge that I experienced when I joined the council was that we had a very limited scope of training programs available. I'm very happy to share that in about a year's time, we have increased the sectors from 6 to 23 sectors in the industry that we are working with. We have close to 250 programs that we have taken up from the industry with the help of industry to understand what are the job roles in which they are looking at hiring people with abilities. I will not say disabilities, people with abilities, diverse abilities. And we have been able to adapt them to different abilities or different disabilities. We're very happy to share that we have also formulated an apprenticeship program for autism. And that is one sector that we are working very closely. I have one. I'm hoping that by the end of 2022, I'll have 6 of such programs running across 6 different industries and then take it forward from there. But when I'm working with the industry and working with the society, there are two challenges that I'm facing. My biggest challenge is to convince the parents to send their children for vocational training, especially when I move out of the urban geographies. One way that we are addressing that is that taking the training centers as close as possible to where the people are located. So we are now formulating modular training centers, which can be put on a truck, taken to the proximity of where the trainees are, train them. Once that universe is exhausted, move that center to another location, which makes it more cost effective and it makes it easier. And what we are also hearing is that it is also encouraging the participation of the women in these programs to go up. Second challenge that I'm facing, when I'm looking at larger industries, they have understood the desire is there, the drive is there, the intention is there. When I go to the smaller towns and smaller organizations, though the intentions are there, the challenge that they face is they don't know what to do. And I'll talk about a government department that I visited a few months back in one of the state governments. They have hired a disabled person and they're asking me, what do I do with the person? We don't know how to engage, we don't know how to deploy the person. The person comes every day, sits in the office, does something, goes back, at the end of the month, gets a salary. So as a council, we are working on a job role called Job Coaches for Inclusivity. This will enable the organizations to integrate with our people, to understand what needs to be done and how we can take it forward. Also, we are working with industries, and I'm very happy to say a lot of industries are now coming up and saying in tier 1 cities and larger corporates, they're coming in asking us that, look, now we have these people at a certain level. We are wanting to move them to the next level in terms of hierarchy and promote them. How do we go about doing it? How do we identify the job roles? How do we optimize and design the training programs, so on and so forth. So that's a very, very positive sign. On the school front is something that we are working, because we are progressively realizing that when we are looking at school education, by the time the children move out of school education system into the vocational education system, at times the entire formative learning and a lot of additional skills that they're supposed to have has not completely been built. So we are also working with the government to bring in a pre-vocational module for the schools. It will be coming out in form of a qualification pack designed and approved by the government. Anybody can pick it up and pull it and train it. It'll start in class 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. We're looking at two different categories. One is sensory challenges and sensory challenges. That's how things are being designed as a part of it. There's a lot I can talk. This is one area that is really, really passionate about, and George is aware. We work very closely, but on account of paucity of time, broader aspects have been discussed. On the skilling side, as a council, we are very committed to do the skilling in larger numbers. We have done close to about 1.5 lakh people trained in the last 5 years. My attempt is in next 3 years, I should be doing about 5 lakh people, but it cannot be done without the support of the industries. If I'm able to understand from the industries, what are their plans, what are their numbers, some of the industries are coming up and they are engaging very closely, especially the logistics and the e-commerce sector. IT sector is something that we are also engaging with. So with these, we'll be able to do wider numbers, larger numbers, and more comprehensive trainings. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So the operative words this evening are innovation, collaboration, accountability, monitoring, and data. The reason why Raveendra Singh was last in the panel was that he's from the government, and government is the foundation, and we are all built on part of it. And as he said, the problem in the country is humongous, large numbers. The challenge on the panel also was difficult because the numbers were huge, and 40 minutes was a little time. So anyway, thank you very much, each of you panelists, for your inputs, and I hope we have useful content to take this campaign forward. Thank you very much. Thank you.
George, may I request you to just spend a couple of minutes, if you can, and round up both the panels very briefly, if you could.
Okay. This is a googly which I was not prepared for. So I think when we looked at the first panel, I think there were a lot of issues which were raised, which is of awareness, the programs not reaching out to people, accessibility was an issue which was raised, the understanding of disability was another issue that was raised. The attitude that is there in the general public and the implementing agencies was another area which was kind of focused. And I think the solutions which were generally offered included, I think, innovation, thinking out of the box, dialogue, use of technology, and kind of building awareness and basically bringing disability into the mainstream. So this would be the sum and substance of this all. And there's something I was meaning to say right in the beginning when I heard Mr. Gogoi, which is in the 1950s, there was a person who was blind who was an elected member of parliament. And I think his being in the parliament has something to do with what Venkatesh had said. People with disability who live and become part of the community manages to play a role in actually furthering the part of disability, including disability in the mainstream. And I would like to kind of appeal to Arman and NCP EDP who are leading this campaign, that I think while we talk about the issues and the gaps, I think we need to also start talking about people with disability participating in the mainstream of the scheme of things, whether it is AIDS awareness, whether it is poverty alleviation, whether it is about Swachh Bharat, whatever be the national programs. If we people with disability also can be part of that, I think that would make us a more enduring population of the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, George, for summing that up so well. And thank you to all the panelists in the second panel discussion for presenting your unique points of view. Thank you very much. Friends, we now have a short film on the book Invisible Majority, which is co-authored by Mr. V.R. Feroz. Can we have the film, please?
If you were given a chance to speak to the world, what would you say?
If I were given a chance, I would ask people to stop looking at me differently. When I walk into a room, I know people take notice. For a moment, they go quiet before I can hear the whispers. I may be visually impaired, but I can feel every eye. I wouldn't want people to tell me how inspired they are, how proud they are of me for every little thing that I do. Because I'm not doing anything different. I'm just living my life like everyone else does. Don't put me on a pedestal just because I'm a person with a disability. Just let me be a part of the world as much as you are.
Invisible Majority, a must read, I think. Mr. Feroz, can I request you to speak a little bit about the book? Thank you.
I promise to make it really short because I know everybody's probably waiting for the dinner. Just two things, and I'm saying this to Som sir as well, whom I consider one of the legends in our industry, that I'll consider the book to be a success only when more people without any disabilities will actually read it than people with disabilities. Honestly, if only people with disabilities read it has no meaning, because then everybody knows what I'm speaking about. The second thing, what I found, I've spent the last 7 years in the US, and I've probably read more books on disabilities than anything else. And the reason I wrote this was I honestly didn't find a high quality, holistic book on disabilities that tracks the entire history of the disability movement in India, that talks about all the incredible work done by young entrepreneurs. I've covered at least 10 young entrepreneurs whom I believe will actually be solving the real problems that we face. Talking about the caregivers, which we sometimes completely ignore. So this is kind of a holistic picture of disability in India. And I really hope that this is read and become part of mainstream conversation. I was very fortunate to meet Dr. Kalam, whom I consider as one of my mentors, way back in 2013, when I went to him with the idea of how do we make India inclusive by 2030. And he said something incredibly profound. He said, Feroz, if you want to drive change, it can only happen by changing the mindset of the youth. And he said the only way to do that is by doing two things. Youth will only listen to either parents or teachers. And if you have a teenage child, you will really know that children will not listen to the parents. So if you ask them about inclusion, they'll talk about exclusion. So, but the only way they will listen to the parents is by parents role modeling it. If you tell them what to do, they will not do it. But if you role model it, they will probably understand you better. But he said something very profound. He said, we need teachers to drive change in this country. All progressive nations, teachers are the most highest paid, but if you look at India, it's not where it should be. So one of my hopes, and this is something I've been talking to Arman Bhai as well, that I want this book to be a mandatory reading for teachers in schools. So I've been talking to all my friends and says, even if you don't read it, please gift it to your child's teacher, because teachers have to understand what inclusion truly means. One of the reasons I had to go to the US was my son is non-verbal, so he can't speak, which basically meant he can't go to school. He just couldn't go to no school will admit him because he couldn't speak. And this is, I'm talking about 2014, when autism was not even one of the disabilities. We had only 7 at that time. So it was not even any of the disabilities. So he couldn't go to a school. Because he was nonverbal, people assumed that he's probably deaf and mute. And I said, no, that's different. He's actually on the autism spectrum. And so I was obviously had to leave the country, go to the US. But I still believe, for me, it's a moral obligation to drive change in this country. And so I've been running the India Inclusion Summit, which is now one of the world's largest events, focused entirely on disability, held in Bangalore every year for the last 9 years. We are not doing it this year because of COVID, but hopefully we'll do it next year. Again, my ask to all of you is, don't just buy the books, actually read it, because that's the main idea. Numbers don't matter if you don't read it. So if you can spread the word, very grateful. All the proceeds from the book go to NCPED. So thank you very much for listening to me, and thank you for inviting me, Arman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Feroz, and let's hope that the book is read widely and whatever issues that you've raised are followed up. And now to wind up, I'd like to request Mr. Arman Ali, Executive Director, NCPDP, to propose a vote of thanks.
So this will be quick, and thank you so much, everyone, for being patient. And we're quite in time. We have not overshot. I just like to correct Feroz. Not all the proceeds, all the royalty from the thing will be coming to NCP-EDP. So we still need all the help and all the resources that we need to do what we do. So please do spread the message. And so very to the point, I will come. We have been deliberating over the last 3-4 months with the sector, and we've seen what the COVID has done to all of us, and we're still in the midst of it. So traditionally, we definitely, we put up a chartered demand for the government, which needs to be implemented as soon as possible. And it is with that in mind, we bring in people fly from Bombay just to be here and speak to us for 2 minutes. So Shilpi, thank you so much. I think your voice really matters to us. And coming from somebody like you, somebody like Feroz, somebody like George, from Kavya, Mukhija, and so on, I think the message is very loud and clear. We have met everybody sit here, right from somebody who's sitting in Anandpur, from a rural areas talking about poverty and disability, from somebody who's come from San Francisco, still believe that so much to be done around disability in India and in San Francisco as well. I've been there, but we'll get onto this later. So, before I get into the thank you list, which is a long one, and I must read out the charter of demand with the disability sector wants to put. So we have spoken, all the panelists, Justice Bhatt, Mr. Somitul, and so many of us spoke about the implementation of the RPWD Act 2016. I think this is 5 years. We have failed many timelines around accessibility, which should have been done so far, but there is no discourse around it in any forums. So even disabled people fail to raise issues when they speak. We know we are getting complacent at some point. We're getting used to being, taken for granted. I think we need to wake up and ask the strong questions. Where is the law? Why it has not been implemented? We need disaggregated data on disability. We are very serious about it. We are serious about the census, which is going to be around the corner, maybe around early next year or when. And it's not limited to census. Anything that you do, where is the data involved, we want to know how many disabled people go to movies, how many people actually buy alcohol, how many people with disabilities are going to schools, how many dropping out, how many losing jobs, how many waiting for getting jobs. I think anything where is data, we want disability to be a data point there. And I think this is high time. I think I have been listening this from Javed Bhai from 1998, that all ministries and departments should have a committee or unit on disability, and with people with disability participating in it. I think we cannot blame the Department of Persons or with Empowerment for Persons with Disability or Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. They are doing whatever they can do in their right in when it comes to affirmative action. When it comes to spreading awareness at certain level, they are doing whatever they do with a limited budget, which is cut every year. So I think every important ministry should create a unit on disability, education, urban development, finance, railways, aviation. I mean, you name it. I think we need to have that sooner than later. Affordable, accessible healthcare service for all persons with disability, with also an insurance. We know in this country, people with disabilities who need insurance the most doesn't get insurance. No insurance company gives you. I don't have insurance. I spend 20,000 rupees per month on my medication every month. My hospitalizations are not covered in a time like COVID. Imagine the plight of somebody who is poor, living in a village, doesn't even think about, I think, surviving. I think there's no discourse around their lives. I think tax incentive, I think it's been long that this people with disability who are earning. Kavya talked about how disabled people's life are expensive. The cost of disability, that needs to be identified by the government. Digital inclusion, cities, towns, needs to be made non-negotiable. I think, everything that we do is digital, everything we want to do. This morning, this morning and from last 2-3 weeks, we are trying to get this ramp in place here. It was not done till half an hour before the program. And that is the level of understanding of people. Something which you paid for, something which you want to which is non-negotiable, and it's very disheartening, and this is Delhi, for God's sake. This is the Constitution Club, and accessible transport and tourism, and political participation of persons with disability at all levels, right from the panchayat to the Rajya Sabha to the upper house, and not to forget the disability inclusive disaster risk reduction. I think this largely covers almost everything, and it will take another 10 years for us to figure out how to get there, but we will not stop. For at least I can speak on behalf of NCP-EDP and each of my partners, the National Disability Network, that we will not stop. We will continue to ask the difficult questions. We'll continue to question the status quo, and we change it in times to come. So, my friends in the sector, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, and all the stakeholders, allies, we need all your support to fund this campaign, the Missing Millions. It is that time of that time that we recognize people with disability as people first, and not somebody which is an object of pity and you get onto it when everything else is done. So I look forward to your support. Thank you so much in this. So now that we thought I was done, but the one last thing to go is so I had the vote of thanks, which is, I must start with thanking Mr. Eric Falt, the country director UNESCO, for agreeing to be partnering with us on this campaign. It means a lot for us, Joyce, and thank you for being here. Justice Bhatt, taking out time from his schedule to be here. Firoz Bhai, thank you for thinking of NCP-EDP for your book launch and extending the royalty which comes from the book towards NCP-EDP. Thank you so much from the entire NCP-EDP team, the board, and everybody. The National Association of the Deaf, and Narayan ji, Anuj ji, for your support. Mr. Gaurav Gogoi, Member of Parliament, for taking our time, for being here. My sign language interpreters, Ria and Sarah, thank you so much for your undying. Thank you. Without you, this not be possible. My friends, our friends from media, those who are present, those who will work with us, we look for your continuous support. Now, this would not have been possible without the support of each and every member of my team, the NCP-EDP team. Please, a big round of applause for each one of them. And I must mention, this young colleague of mine, Akshay, and he's driving it. Please stand up. So you must know the man who has been behind the Missing Million thing, reaching out to each one of you, following everything. I think big round of applause for him. My colleague Asifa, my colleague Niharika is here. My colleague Bejar, Rosie, Avdesh, Rajesh, Dinesh. We have people who are interning with us, Kinza, each one of them has not taken off from last 2 months, all weekends. I don't know, it's even, when Rati Mishan nods, I think it doesn't make any difference. That's how it's supposed to be, this is the message. So I think we will continue to work hard as we go along, but do hold a hand. Javed Bhai, thank you so much. You take the pain of coming all the way from Kashmir just to be a part of this meeting. I hope you will carry forward the message and voices of people with disabilities. Anybody whom I have left out and not mentioned in a word of thanks is somebody we cannot forget ever. Sangeeta Bedichi. A big round of applause. Always behind the scenes. Never, I would have been hanged if I. Yeah, okay. Thank you so much, Sangeeta. It means a lot. You're part of the team. We cannot imagine any event without you, and you fill in the gap. And I learn each time you speak, and you give us confidence and to do what we do in terms of events. I mean, and I'm
truly humbled.
Thank you so much. Very kind of you. Thank you, sir, for all your support. very kind of you to be the guiding light for NCPDP. Mr. Som Mittal, he is the guiding light for us, always giving us direction. The follow-up phone calls, I hope they keep coming. Thank you so much, sir. So good night. I think not good night. Let's go for and have dinner, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you. And a very happy World Disability Day to everybody.
Happy World Disability Day. And just one thing before we conclude, we'd also like to thank our partners, UNESCO, Disability Rights Fund, Infosys, EXL, Bata, Sheila Group, and Atul Nishar Foundation. Thank you very much. Everyone, enjoy your dinner. Thank you.